I would like to thank you for attending today's webinar, The Evolution of Google Search Result Pages and Their Effect on Users' Behavior. Your presenter for this session are Ian Everdell, Manager UX and Research, and Rebecca Maines, Marketing Strategist. Today we will cover what is exactly the Google Golden Triangle. We will also explain to you what the eye tracking technology is and why was the study actually conducted. Your key takeaways during the webinar will be what we learned, the implication for businesses, and benchmarking click-through rates. Hope you find the session both informative and valuable. Have a great webinar, everybody. Ian, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks very much, Anna. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Up on the screen now is an image you're likely all familiar with. This is the Google Golden Triangle. It's an eye tracking research project that was done by Enquiro, which is one of the precursors to Mediative, in 2005. So in 2005, Google had been around for 3 or 4 years, was really gaining popularity. And there was some data coming out about click-through rates, and we knew that the majority of clicks went to the first couple of organic results and that sort of thing. But we didn't understand sort of what made people click or why they chose a particular result. So we did this eye tracking study looking at which results people look at, and also asked them lots of questions about why they chose a particular result. And what we got out of it was this, or one of the things we got out of it anyway, was this heat map that you see on the screen now. And if you're not familiar with heat maps, this is showing where people spend the most time looking on the page. So the red area shows where they spent the most time looking on a Google search results page. And you can see that really visual attention is clustered in that top left corner in sort of a triangle shape. So people read most of the way across the first result, then would go down to the second one, read about halfway, and then it sort of became more and more vertical. And really, if you weren't within those first 3 or 4 results, you were unlikely to be in that consideration set that people were choosing their click from. So this was super interesting, but of course this was done 9 years ago on search results pages that were just 10 blue links, and we don't have those anymore. So in 2014, Google's algorithm has been updated. They show a lot more stuff on the SERP. So that means we want to figure out whether people look at the results differently, if they click on things differently, and how the design and layout of the search results page affects their behavior. And just to give you an idea of what we're seeing now, so I mentioned that in 2005, it was really 10 blue links. Sometimes you got paid advertising in there as well. But now you can get local listings, you can get maps, you get stuff on the right rail, you get thumbnail images, you get news articles, you get video clips, you can get star ratings, all kinds of sort of markup like that. The carousel is a new feature that was introduced about a year ago, very popular in the States now, and is starting to show up for more searches in Canada as well. You get, I mentioned news articles, they show who's authored things. You get blog posts being pulled in there. The knowledge graph is showing up information that Google thinks it can answer without you clicking away. And that's having a huge effect on some advertisers and organic results because you no longer need to click. You can just type in a calculation or find information about a company or get the weather without actually going anywhere other than the Google results page. So there are huge differences now. And what we wanted to know was where do people look the most? Where do they click the most? How important is it, or is the location of the listing in terms of getting attention from the people looking at the SERP and getting those clicks? Whether the fact that the SERP has become much more complex really affects your strategy for being found and seen by your potential customers. So is it still good enough just to try to achieve top organic position and everything else will just sort of fall into place? And whether that click activity has really changed depending on where you are on the SERP as well. So just to give you a quick idea of how we conducted this study, we had 53 people come into our research lab in Toronto. They did 43 different search tasks. And these people were all sort of general consumers. They would be doing normal searches. We had them do B2B searches. We had them do B2C searches. We gave them a bunch of stories. So we said, imagine you're moving from Toronto to Vancouver. And then we had a bunch of search tasks in those stories. So we would say, you need to find a moving company in Toronto. You're looking for apartments to rent in Vancouver, different stuff like that, and let them basically search however they thought they would search for that normally. Now, the only sort of restriction we had on that was they were able to type in whatever they wanted, but they ended up seeing the same SERP across all 53 participants. So that lets us sort of control for that exposure and make sure that we get good eye tracking data. And speaking of eye tracking data, what we then go and measure, in addition to getting the heat map, which you'll see lots of throughout the presentation, we also look at, for each of those areas of interest, so we can go in and say, this is the first organic result, this is the map on the right-hand side. We can then look at how quickly people look at it, how much time they spend looking at it, how many people look at it, and ultimately the number of clicks as well. Now, you'll note a small asterisk beside the number of clicks there, and Rebecca will reiterate this later on. But with 53 participants, that's a really small sample size for looking at click-through rates. However, we feel that the data that we got in the study is really very directional, matches with what we're seeing from other data sources as well. So we are going to show you what we got in terms of click-through rates as well. And if you're a little bit unfamiliar with eye tracking, just to give you a quick overview of how this works, there are little cameras built into the screen. They take videos of the participants' eyes while they're looking at the screen. And that lets us capture where they do and do not look on the page. And we typically assume that where people are looking is a measure of attention. Now, that's not always the case. If you've ever looked in the fridge for ketchup and can't find it, you'll know that you can be looking right at something and not paying attention to it. But typically, particularly with web behavior, and even more so in a very directed, focused search task like we had them doing, we're very confident that where people are looking is what they're also paying attention to. So what this lets us do then is see which results are making it into the consideration set and what people are choosing from when they ultimately make that click. So I will hand it over to Rebecca to talk about the results.
Thanks, Ian. So there's 3 key takeaways that we discovered from the research study. And the first one is that as search engine users, we've always been conditioned to look at the top listings because we expect Google to do its job and put that most relevant search result at the top. And because of this is why the golden triangle always existed. But what we're seeing in the heat maps that have come out of this study is a spread of minimal attention and activity that touch on other elements of the SERP as participants are looking for that top organic listing. So we can say that as searchers, where we have been conditioned to look has now changed because we're not now only looking at the top left-hand corner because the top organic listing is not always there. So what does this mean for businesses? Well, firstly, SEO strategy is no longer one-size-fits-all. So standard SEO practices might not always work because it's not always the top organic results that are now getting the clicks. We also have cases when listings in different locations on the results page will get more attention and clicks. So secondly, a business's listing on the results page should be seen as a branding opportunity, even if a click is not captured. So as I said, we learned that it's not always the listings that are looked at the most that are getting the most clicks. In one task, we had 3 listings combined that captured almost 60% of page clicks, but they were actually only viewed for 20% of the time. So 80% of the time is being spent viewing other areas of the page that weren't necessarily clicked on. So paid search can have branding effects similar to display ads where they're capturing attention even if it's not necessarily getting the clicks. So in a previous study that Mediative did featuring Honda, we discovered that when a brand is in the top paid listings and in the top organic listings, it achieved a significant lift in brand association, aided brand recall, and purchase consideration. And in this example here from the research, this listing highlighted in blue received only 1 page click, but 73% of the participants did look at it. So businesses need to learn how to be visible where there's going to be the biggest impact on branding and traffic. So for example, local businesses must ensure that their Google Plus local pages are fully optimized, as these are directly tied to the appearance and position in a local search query. In this study, we found that 45% of clicks within a local listing box were to the top 2 listings, and those top 2 listings also captured 51% of the time spent looking within the local listings box. We also learned from this study that people are viewing more search results during each single session, but they're then spending less time viewing each one. So in 2005, people viewed each listing for just under 2 seconds, and now in 2014, each listing is viewed for just over 1 second. And we can almost say now then that searches are conditioned by mobile to scan vertically. And we can really see this by comparing these 2 images. So in 2005, as Ian showed earlier, scanning was much more horizontal. But here we can see in 2014, the right rail sponsored ads are all but ignored because the concentration of gaze activity is now far less horizontal. So what does this mean to businesses? Well, front-loading relevant content in both organic and sponsored listings is key. Searchers are skimming down that left-hand side of the results, and they're waiting for something relevant to jump out to them. So keywords, meta descriptions, content, ratings, reviews, these are all necessary tactics to align to that scan behavior. So in this example, the listing shown here had relevant content. It was front-loaded. There are some star ratings. It has a rating out of 10. The meta description there is relevant, and the word review or rating appears in this description 6 times. So although this listing was the 4th organic listing, it captured 26% of the page clicks, and 15% of the time spent on the page was spent looking at this listing. So schema markup should also be used wherever possible. It's one of the most underused yet highly effective SEO tools, and it helps search engines to crawl, index, and rank a site's content. The final key takeaway from the research looks at positioning on the search results page. We found that businesses that are positioned lower, and that's especially in positions 2 to 4, will see much more click activity than they did several years ago. So while the number 1 organic listing still captures the most click activity at almost 33%, regardless of what page elements are presented on the page, that will still capture the most clicks. But prime organic real estate is shifting further down the page, and it's worth much more. So as we can see in this image, the number 1 organic listing is much lower down on the page, and it's opened up that top area of the page with much more potential area for businesses to achieve visibility. So for businesses, this means the importance of the website being the first listing versus on the first page is very dependent on the searcher's intent plus their brand strength. So earning a first-place organic ranking can be extremely difficult unless you have an endless budget. But our study found that 84% of page clicks on average were won by areas of the SERP that were above the 4th organic listing. So for businesses looking to improve website traffic, it's worth considering other areas to try appearing in rather than focusing all efforts on ranking number 1. So that top organic spot can be very difficult to obtain, especially for businesses that are competing with big brands. And even if you manage to rank highly, capturing audience traffic can still be a challenge. But what can help that is understanding the searcher's intent. And knowing your searcher's intent can help determine how much of an investment you're going to spend in trying to appear higher on the search results page. So to explain that further, most people use a search engine for one of 2 reasons. The first being to gather alternatives or to research options, and we call this an informational search. And the second reason for people to use a search engine is to go directly to a site that best matches that particular need at the time, and we would call this a navigational search. So you can see by looking at these heat maps, if searchers come to a site via an informational search, businesses can afford to be lower on the page because we found it took longer for people to make a selection for these searches, and they tended to scroll much further down the page. And we actually found that 4 times more clicks from informational searches were below the 4th organic listing versus navigational searches. So to summarize the key takeaways from the research, it's not always about getting into the number 1 spot on Google. It is the spot that captures the highest number of clicks, but other areas on the search results page, particularly the area above the top 4 organic listings, can be almost as lucrative. So businesses should be focusing on traffic and position in tandem and not in isolation. And putting effort into appearing in multiple areas of the search results page will help businesses be seen and chosen by the right audience. Secondly, it's getting harder to predict which elements are going to be present on the search results page because Google is changing its algorithms and the way listings are presented, and it's becoming much more dynamic and complex. So focusing on optimizing your listings just for Google is not the right approach. It is important to take into account these new page elements and how you can appear in them, but a solid content strategy that creates content to meet the differing needs of the end user is a much more robust strategy than just chasing after that algorithm. So what do the results mean for specific types of advertisers? Well, for national advertisers, and particularly smaller brands, competing in search is going to be difficult. In many of the search tasks that we presented to participants, they would simply scan over the smaller, lesser-known brands and seek out a big-name brand that they were familiar with. So smaller brands could consider other online and offline channels to build their brand name, or perhaps try advertising niche products where competition is going to be less. For local businesses, there's the opportunity to appear in several areas of the search results page, taking up more valuable screen real estate. Now, we were surprised in this study that the local listings box didn't capture more views and clicks, but businesses should still be optimizing their Google plus local pages because having a position in the local listings box can reinforce the brand, especially if an organic listing exists either above or below the box as well. And for online publishers rely heavily on unique visitors to pages on their site, and we believe that many publishers are likely to be negatively impacted by especially the knowledge graph from Google, because searchers can often get the answers to their questions directly on the SERP without even having to leave to go to the publisher's site. But our study did show that even when there is a knowledge graph present, there's still a potential for clicks to the top organic listing, and it was still looked at by the majority of participants. And it's also worth remembering that not all searchers will be really specific with their intent in a search. So in the study, we asked people to convert $100 Canadian to US dollars. In reality, people might not be searching so specifically and might simply search for a currency converter, in which case the knowledge graph doesn't appear. So having a strong paid search campaign and a strong SEO strategy can still generate significant traffic. So the final area that I want to cover today is the benchmark click-through rates from 2005 to 2014. So I'm just going to cover the click-through rates of the sponsored and the organic listings. However, we do include click-through rates of all the other areas on the search results page, like the carousel, the knowledge graph, etc., in the full study, which I will direct you to at the end of this presentation. So in this chart here, you can see the click-through rates from 2014 shown in blue, and from 2005 shown in green. And you can see that nearly every click-through rate per listing position is slightly higher in 2014. So given that these numbers are quite small, I've also put them out into a table. So if we look first at the sponsored listings, we can see that from 2005 to 2014, there's actually been very little change in the number of clicks won by the sponsored ads. And likewise, the clicks captured by the top #1 organic listing has not changed much over the years. But where we are seeing the biggest change in click-through rate is in the organic listings that are below the top % listing. So almost 63% of all clicks in 2014 were to the top 4 organic listings, compared to only 47.8% in 2005. And almost 75% of all clicks were to all the organic listings in 2014 versus only 57% in 2005. So in 2005, 67.6% of clicks were to somewhere higher than the 4th organic listing. So that's, if you imagine a search results page, think of the 4th organic listing, everything that's above that. So that will be paid results, possibly the local listings, the carousel, the knowledge graph. In 2014, that number's now increased to 84%. So that indicates, as I mentioned previously, that the prime real estate of the top organic listings is now shifting further down the page. So more clicks are being captured by those new elements that Google is placing at the top of the search results page. So this concludes the key takeaways of the study. If you're wondering where you can download the full study, you can do that by going to mediative.com/SERP. We're not going to be having a live Q&A session today because what we're really hoping is that everyone will go and download the study first, as many of the questions you might have will be answered from reading that. It's a very comprehensive document that outlines all of the elements of the SERP, what we discovered, and what you can do to maximize your own visibility, as well as the click-through rates that we've discovered for each listing position. So once you've downloaded and reviewed the document, if you still have questions, I would like to personally answer them for you. So you can send me an email at rebecca.mains@mediative.com, and I will provide you with a detailed full answer as soon as I can. And that's it for today. So thank you very much for attending. Please go ahead, download the full study. Don't hesitate to email me any questions. And very shortly today, we'll be emailing you a recording of this presentation so you can review it at your own time. Thanks, everyone.